listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all. For all of you who are new to the show, Changing Reality is a show that features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are in essence changing their own reality. So we'll be hanging out through the show and interviewing, speaking to all kinds of people from social change makers, entrepreneurs, business owners, to even top executives, artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals from all across the world, and also bringing their stories here to the Penn campus. So by listening to these inspiring stories and journeying of how they started, how they shaped their careers, and the lessons they picked up along the way to change their reality, hopefully we'll all be able to pick up a few nuggets of wisdom that will be helpful in our own strides towards the things that we want to achieve in life as well. And I'm someone who truly believes in the power of stories. I wanted to do this show simply because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who do phenomenal things and make waves in the lives of those around them. And I'm super passionate about learning these stories because I believe that by listening to the experiences of others, by figuring out what they did right, we can shorten our own learning curves. And that can really accelerate the work that we want to do. In fact, to show you how passionate I am with stories, I actually personally founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance that started back at home in Malaysia, which is where I'm from, that collaborates today with not just our Malaysian Ministry of Education, but over 28 countries in a sense. We work with 35,000 students to help provide an alternative education platform for any student who wants to change their reality. So essentially, we work from students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, programs, experiential learning activities, and projects that help them discover their passion, learn about themselves and the world around them, and start their own careers while they're still in school. That creates meaningful impact, not just for themselves, but for those around them as well. And as I said, we've been lucky to work with over 35,000 students, 970 communities, and have incubated countless number of student-run projects and social enterprises run by students aged 8 to 25 years old themselves. And the basis of all of this has been stories, has been kind individuals who've been willing to take their time, share their experiences, share their thoughts in a sense. And similarly, I hope this show is that platform for all of you listening in today, so that through this show, you can also get the right, at least direction to find the experiences, to find the meaningful conversations that can shape your career. So if you want more info about the show, if there's any specific topics that you want to talk about, let us know in the chat below, in the comments, and we'll try to pick up as many as we can as well. So today we have a very special guest with us today. We have the Chief Analytics and AI Officer as well as a Managing Director at True Digital, one of Thailand's biggest technology companies. So True Digital Group is a multinational technology company headquartered in Bangkok, Thailand, which was born through the vision of True Corporation and created with the aim to become the ultimate digital transformation enabler for everyone in Southeast Asia. Our speaker today is a member of also the Forbes Technology Council, an invitation-only community of world-class CIOs, CTOs, and technology executives who have been reviewed by the committee and has a very, very, I would say, stringent acceptance process based on their track record of successfully impacting business growth. So he's also the winner of the Worldwide Cloudera's 2019 Industry Transformation Award. And prior to that, even had amazing roles all across the globe. He worked at McKinsey. He was the Group Vice President of Data Analytics at Axiata, and with so many more other experiences. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker today, Pedro, to our virtual stage. So let's bring him on.
How are you? Nice to talk to you, Harsha. It's a pleasure. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And yeah, looking forward to chatting with you.
Well,
and
thank
to
you.
share a little bit about what I have been doing so far, which I'm sure is well, I mean, is what I have done. Probably other people have been more impressive, but well, I mean, I think I have a few interesting stories.
I would agree. I think you have many interesting stories to share, and especially because you've done so many things in the telecommunications industry, in the different industries that you've been, that I'm so glad that you actually agreed to be on our show. So thank you for joining us, number one, on our show today. There's so many ways we can start this conversation, but I always like starting at the very beginning, in a sense, on your journey itself. So we've achieved so many things, as I said, Forbes Technology Council, award-winning executive, top executive in some of the largest companies in Southeast Asia here. But your journey actually starts literally halfway across the world. I think you're from Spain. You mentioned also, yeah, and I think you studied engineering in the telecommunications industry when you first started out. Tell us where your journey really starts. Was this always like the field that you wanted to get into? Were you always confident of where you were going, or were you once a lost college student like many of us today?
I think my journey started when I was studying at secondary school, when I was a student. And when I was probably 15, 16 years old, there were two things that impacted my life, and I think they have been quite significant going forward. Right. One of the things around those years is I went overseas. I went out of my country for the first time. I remember in 1996, I went to the UK. In 1997, I went to Australia. I did a studies change in Australia. So that was something very significant because it opened my mind to other countries, to other cultures. And that has been a constant in my life. I have lived in 10 countries. We can talk about it, but traveling, learning languages, getting to know people from other cultures has been very, very important in my whole life. So that was something that was really... at that point in time, that was something that started to change or started to shape my life. And then the other thing is also around the same time when I was 16, 15, around that time, I became really passionate about math. I became really passionate about numbers. I participated in a number of math and physics competitions back in my country. I got really excited about the subject because I had amazing teachers back in secondary school and high school. And that is something that I have further developed about how to use numbers in business, right? And this has taken me to my current role where I am Chief Analytics and AI Officer, right? Which is basically applying numbers with a little bit of sense. So these were the two things. And I think my career and also my personal life has been determined by these two axes, no? Going to more countries, getting to know people from other places, and at the same time making things numeric, quantitative, making sense of the numbers in order to follow or in order to achieve a goal, in general, a business goal.
No, I think that's very interesting. It's very left brain, right brain on one side.
It's exactly left brain, right brain. Yes, I would say so. It's exactly so. On the one side, you have the people, right? People from different places, languages, creativity, and all that. Having fun with people, building relations. On the other hand, you have the logic, right? And I think it's really important to have both of them in order to, at work, in business, in so many facets of life, it's very important to be well balanced in your left and right brain, right?
But it seems like something that comes very naturally to you in a sense. I doubt 16-year-old you was planning, how do I develop my right brain, my left brain in a sense.
Oh, I had no idea. It just happened by chance. I mean, it's not that I was thinking about developing. No, I had absolutely no idea.
But it's very interesting in a sense. And I know many people who have a lot of talent in maybe maths or analytics or certain specific thing that they do, but maybe they're not as well developed in the the other components of the people skills, and vice versa as well. So it's very interesting that you managed to balance both. And I think that definitely, as you said, set the stage for the rest of your career, traveling to 10 different countries, being a very prominent executive in the industry that applies a lot of these fundamental concepts of math and in data and so forth. When you first started, in a sense, and this probably it's a bit different, or at least a lot more scarier than your later career journey of traveling. But how do you feel going to different parts of the world, spending time there? Was there any awkwardness? Was there a certain skill that you picked up in being able to adapt and talk to people at a young age?
It was just amazing. I enjoyed that. I mean, I did that because I enjoyed that. I went to Australia. I spent 3 months in Australia in 97. I think in 98, I went to the UK. I went to Venezuela in South America in 98. I mean, Venezuela was a very different country from what is now. I started traveling. I went to Germany, traveled throughout Europe. So I have lived in so many countries, right? So places where I have lived more than, let's say, 3 months are, obviously Spain, Germany, France, Hong Kong and China, because I was in Shenzhen as well. USA, Chile, Malaysia. So you're Malaysian, and now
Yeah.
I'm right. So, but I always enjoy that, and obviously there are misunderstandings sometimes, there are cultural differences, but as you are getting more in touch with people from other places, you realize that the mistakes that you make don't matter that much. As you become more international, people develop an ability to understand the intentions behind what is said, because everybody's speaking a foreign language, right? So it was a lot of fun. And one of the things that I realized, I mean, I learned multiple languages over the years. One of the things that I realized is that as I'm getting older, learning new languages is more difficult than when I was young, much more difficult. But well, I mean, I did that. I traveled to so many places. I have developed all my career overseas because I enjoy it, because I enjoy being in different places.
Oh, very well said. How did all of these experiences and finding your passion or your love for math and all of that shape you in making that decision of where you wanted to pursue your next step, or where you wanted to start your tertiary education, going to university and all of that? Did it
So,
did it have an effect on what you want to do next? Were you a lot more clearer than you would have been without? Or tell us
so
about that.
I studied telecom engineering in my hometown in Bilbao, and then I did exchange in Germany. Well, I studied telecom engineering. That was 1998 when I got to university, and 1998, 99, 2000, those were the years of the dot-com. And the dot-com was enabled by telecommunications, right? It was enabled by the internet. So I studied telecommunications because I was very excited about the dot-com. I was very excited about all those digital internet companies that were starting to appear, and I wanted to learn how that worked. Probably at that time, I was not necessarily I was more interested about understanding how it really works than about creating something of my own, right? But well, that's why I decided to study telecommunications. It was very numeric, very quantitative, sometimes too much, sometimes too much. And then, well, after that, I started working as a programmer. Most people that study engineering end up working as a programmer. That was fun for a while. But at some point, when I was in my mid-20s, I started realizing that I was limiting myself if I just wanted to be an engineer. If I was only able to understand things from a technical perspective, but I was not able to understand things from a business perspective. That business perspective, by the way, could be very quantitative as well, right? And that was the time when I started realizing that in order to go to the next level, I had to study an MBA. And well, I applied for different business schools, and finally I spent 2 years in Chicago Booth, the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and that was amazing. That was absolutely amazing, and I learned so much in that business school. I mean, is one of the business schools that is the business school that has most Nobel prizes in the world, and I met some of them. Well, it was amazing for multiple reasons, right? One of the reasons is that Chicago is very rigorous with subjects. So it's a school that developed quantitative finance, developed a lot of theories in finance. When I was there, they were starting to develop the same theories in marketing, which at that time we called it statistics. Now we call it data science, but it was basically that, right? It was understanding a little bit of statistics and being able to make marketing decisions and sales decisions based on data, which is what I do today. So I got in touch with that for the first time in Chicago when I was learning statistics. The other thing that was really interesting about Chicago is that despite all the quantitative area that Chicago Booth has, people were a lot of fun to work with. People were very humble, and people were very, I would say, it was not competitive at all. Other business schools are probably very competitive. In the US, some business schools are renowned for being competitive. Chicago Booth was very oriented to people, and that was something that I also enjoyed, and I feel very, very much attached to the school. And it helped me taking one step forward in my career, which is understanding business, getting to know people from all around the world, because I mean, in Booth, we were people from, well, every single country, or probably not every single country because there are so many countries, but from many countries.
Enough countries,
It was an amazing experience, right? So yes, absolutely. And then after that, I joined McKinsey, which is like a second MBA. It's like a even more serious MBA. And it was, and that was, I feel also very thankful to the firm. Ex-McKinsey people call McKinsey the firm. Yeah, I mean, I feel very thankful to the firm. It was a place where I learned so much. Well, I worked in the firm in McKinsey. I worked in South America because obviously I speak Spanish, and in South America, well, I have an advantage because I speak the language and I'm very close culturally to them. So it was fun. And in McKinsey, I learned a lot about making sense of business, which I had started to learn in the MBA, but in McKinsey, you take it to the next level, about how to build relations with people, with your clients, with your colleagues, building solid relations based on trust, based on McKinsey always tries to help first. McKinsey always starts helping other people in their clients and to build those relations. And most importantly, how to communicate to senior people, or how to communicate in business an idea, a problem, a solution, how to communicate. That was something that was very important, right? And I did that, well, I mean, I did that in multiple countries because I have always, I mean, I think the country where I have stayed longest is Malaysia, where I have been, well, apart from Spain, of course, is Malaysia, where I was for 7 years, I believe. But apart from that, well, I'm here in Thailand I've been here for, well, not even 1 year. So I always like, for example, in Malaysia, you are Malaysian. I always like, well, getting to know people. Malaysia is a very diverse country where there is people from, well, there is Chinese people, Indian people, Malay people, and all of them are different, right? And all of them have their own particularities. It's a lot of fun to live in Malaysia because every day you learn something new. And that is what I enjoy, right? I wouldn't enjoy personally living in my own country where everything is culturally normal for me. I like living in places where things are, different.
No, very like I love that you said that in a sense, and not just because I'm terribly biased towards Malaysia, but I also love that you bring out kind of like the love for the diversity of learning, for continuously meeting new people and all of that. Tell us a bit about how kind of like as you started getting into the role at McKinsey and all of that, and you started bringing forward the things that you were learning about in the MBA into the real workplace in a sense, and seeing that reflected in clients and all of that. Data is something that often they say never lies. It seems to be very one size fit all at many times, and then here on the other side there's the aspect of communicating the data to different audiences and all of that. Did you have any experiences in a sense of communicating that data in different ways depending on your audience, depending on the people that you're meeting, whether that's culturally different people or whether that's people who just are at different positions in the company, or how was your experience kind of like learning to communicate that data out to different groups of people in a sense, to paraphrase?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when I started working in McKinsey in data-oriented projects, that was in South America.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was in South America. That was the early 2010s. And I just came out of university, out of Chicago, and I knew, well, a lot of different ways of putting numbers together. But clients didn't understand those ways. You were actually, by using that terminology, you were actually getting them lost. Getting them lost. They didn't understand a single word of what you were saying, which, by the way, is quite important as a data professional, or particularly for young people, young boys and girls that just finish engineering and find it they are really smart, they can program anything, but they find it really difficult for them to communicate. It's really difficult, and it's very difficult for maybe more senior people to understand what they say, right? So having this ability to communicate at the same time with a data team and with a business team is very, very important. And in McKinsey and also in other companies, we call these people data translators. And because they translate, because they have all these recommendations that are made based on data, et cetera, and they are able to translate that thing into a language that makes sense for business people, a language that makes sense for the people that have to implement those recommendations.
From the language of numbers to the language of words.
To the language of people, right? So we call them data translators, and this is very, very important. It's very important. And most successful young engineers that I have known are data translators, are people that can talk to both sides of the table, right? That is very important. So I had to learn that the hard way. Clients at that time, analytics data was not a buzzword at that time. And sometimes, even if you made a very complicated analysis, you had to present it with simple overages and simple. At the end of the day, at that time, a business person typically understood that there were different segments with different overages of certain parameters, but much more than that. It was difficult. But it's something that you also realize when you are working in maybe marketing, in data analytics, but applied to marketing, applied to finance, applied to operations, applied to different parts of a business, is that sometimes if you overcomplicate the solution, that solution is not going to be implemented well. Oftentimes, it's about making something that is simple that can be implemented well. If you are making a recommendation about marketing, there will have to be campaign managers that will have to take that to reality. If you are making a recommendation about sales, there is going to be salespeople that have to take it to reality. And the more complicated you make it, the more difficult it's going to be for them to implement it. So oftentimes, particularly in emerging markets, because most of my experience is in emerging markets, oftentimes simplicity pays off rather than sophistication. This is something that sometimes I try to explain, because sophistication is sexy, right? And simplicity is not. But these kind of things are important, and being able, as a data professional, being able to explain this is very important, because otherwise you are not going to have the results that you require, right? There is one funny statistic, is a statistic by Gartner. So Gartner did an analysis and found out that 85% of all data-driven projects fail.
Oh, wow, that is very surprising.
Which makes a lot of sense. It resonates very much with me. It makes a lot of sense. Being able to communicate well, to define it in simple terms that can be implemented, going gradually, all these kinds of things are very, very important, right? Paying attention to the people as aspects of the people that have to implement it, right? If you are doing something for salespeople, it cannot be as complicated as rocket science, because salespeople are not going to be able to. They have their job to do, right? These are some of the things that I learned over time about how to drive these kind of projects, right?
Yep. And in your career, you seem to very quickly move higher and higher in your career. You when you were here in Malaysia, I know that you were I think also a group vice president for data analytics at one point. So very, very fast career progression. What do you think, in your experience, has helped you be able to communicate the data, be able to communicate the science well, so that you could progress in your career? What has been the helpful elements in that? Has it been keeping it simple? If so, how do you really do that in a way? Because you have so many different stakeholders. How do you know what is the right thing to communicate to who?
I wouldn't know. I think the factor that accounts for most of the relative success that I might have had is probably having been in the right place at the right time, which was absolutely random, no?
I doubt it, but okay, all right.
So being somebody that had this combination of data and business at a moment in which industries were demanding for that, right? Yeah, I mean, I think I think that is very important. Sometimes, many times, there are many things that we cannot control, either positive or negative, and this was one of the things that I think helped me. Without me knowing that, right? Without me knowing that. In Axiata, now that you mentioned, it was very interesting because Axiata Axiata, for those that don't know, that is a telecom conglomerate based in Malaysia. Is a company that is based in many countries. Axiata is in Indonesia, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Malaysia, 6 countries, right? It was amazing because there were people from at least 6 countries, if not more. I was in charge of restructuring all the data teams across the whole, all that ecosystem of companies, and it was amazing. And one of the things that I did, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I was traveling all the time, going to Nepal, starting the week in Nepal, finishing the week in Jakarta. I really enjoyed that. Going with people, meeting people in Nepal that take you to their homes. No, for example, Nepalese people are very welcoming. They take you to your home, to their home, and they show you around. It was amazing. But what we did is basically we had a number of business intelligence teams that were doing just reporting in all the companies, and what I tried to do was to transform them in each company into a more or less centralized analytics team that was not only crunching numbers, because analytics is not about crunching numbers, it's about making business decisions with those numbers, or at least recommendations, right? So that's what we tried to do. It was a business first. It was driven by business. It was not driven by technology. We didn't want to make complicated things just for the purpose of making complicated numbers. We wanted to focus on a few use cases which were about marketing campaigns, recommendations of products, pricing, etc. We wanted to focus on a few use cases and make it very, very business-driven. And that is what took us to the Cloudera Award, that we were given in Axiata in 2019, I believe. It was just before COVID. So that was an award that we got, and very interesting. We got that that year in 2019. There were a few companies that got that, and the representation of emerging markets was huge. I mean, there were 2 other companies from Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I think it's the Cloudera Data Impact Awards,
this
right?
This is the Data Impact Award. We got, we won in the category of industry change, I believe. Industry change, on having industry transformation, I believe it was the name. Having transformed an industry by organizing analytics in a different way, in a way that was not in a natural way, not putting technology first, but putting business first.
No, very, very interesting in a sense, especially because on the topic of kind of like industry transformation or kind of like transforming teams in a sense. One thing I often hear is when you go in and you transform an existing process, an existing team in a sense, there's often a lot of friction to change, or a lot of human factors in a sense that maybe slow down the change and make that process a little harder in a sense. And I'm sure that is only extrapolated when you deal with people from different countries in a similar kind of team or larger setting in a sense. For you, were there any kind of like human challenges or challenges in getting people to be receptive to that change of things and all that? How do you go about managing it in a sense?
In every company, there are tensions among different departments. They are not necessarily bad. They are not necessarily bad. It could even be good.
That's a good point.
For example, I am now running a corporate venture that is doing data monetization here in Thailand, and in every company there are these kind of frictions. Typical frictions that happen very often is between product and sales. The people that have to develop a product and the people that to sell it. You are developing something that I cannot sell. You just don't know how to sell it. That's a typical one. There are frictions typically as well between data scientists and the business consultants or the data translators that are the ones that are making the interface between the business and the technical teams. There is typically that kind of friction as well between the technical teams and the business teams, right? There is that kind of friction. I would say that friction, if it is kept to a reasonable level, is positive. Because that friction and that difference of opinions, I mean, we're talking about diversity, right? That is precisely diversity. That difference of opinions is what is pushing everybody upwards, right? So the fact that sales is telling product, I cannot, there is no way to sell this thing. Well, I mean, if product wants to listen, and they should take this feedback and make it better. The same thing the other way around, right? So these kind of frictions always happen. I think the secret is about listening to both parties and being rather than position yourself as a judge that has to say, well, in this situation you are right, in the other situation the other is right. It's more about coordinating them and allowing them to make their own decisions, right? One of the things that I have realized over time, and I have managed different people from many cultures, and I think this is really cross-cultural or relatively cross-cultural. One of the things that people enjoy most is being autonomous, is being able to make their own decisions, is feeling trusted in a way that they can run the steps in their own projects. Probably what you are doing as a manager, you are defining what is the highway they have to follow, what is the direction. You are also asking them to keep you informed. But when it comes to making the tactical decisions, you let them do, right? And I have realized that people typically like that. So sometimes people that have worked with me and they left, they went to other places and they ask, what did you enjoy about working with me? Typically they say this thing. I don't like micromanaging. I only do it if there is no other way. I don't think anybody does. And I don't like micromanaging because, number one, people don't like it. People are more effective the other way around. And the other thing is because I also have more time if I don't do it, because I can dedicate my time to other things. So that was something that is, I would say, relatively cross-culture. So empowering them and saying, hey, I understand that sometimes you're going to have these frictions. I understand that. Talk to each other. As long as it doesn't get out of control, I am fine.
All right. Very, very interesting. And I think it also goes back to kind of like that intersection that you're very good at balancing the data part of it, which is the industry you're in, and also the people part of it. I think you also gave a TEDx talk, if I'm not mistaken, on a similar
the same
topic.
day as you.
Yeah. If I recall, yes.
It was in Kuala Lumpur International Medical University. Correct.
Yeah. That's actually how we got in touch. Yes, I recall. But your TED talk was your TEDx talk was very interesting. I think it was on how AI makes the workplace more human instead of more automated, if I recall correctly, in a sense. And that was a very
correct. I have always been very interested in the interaction of technology and people, how technology changes people's life. And one of the things that we typically hear is that artificial intelligence is going to make the workplace more less human because, well, I mean, you like it or not, sooner or later we're going to have robots that are going to be, and we already have them, right? There is robotic process automation in many firms, in many back office activities like finance, accounting, etc. There are robots in manufacturing. It's very robotized. So we already have that, right? And the tech talk was basically, well, I mean, the fact that robots are taking over some roles that are easier to automate, those roles that are easier to automate are the roles that human beings are not required for, are the roles that are more process-oriented, are the jobs that require human activities that are not uniquely human. The jobs that require activities that are uniquely human cannot be automated because those things are robots cannot do, right? So, for example, things such as creativity, team management, motivation, these kind of things cannot be automated, right? So what we are seeing is that roles that are being automated are pushing people up the staircase, up the ladder into jobs that cannot be automated, right? That has always happened. It happened in agriculture. A lot of people were working in the fields, and then there started to be automation in agriculture, and those people had to go to do other jobs. And this is the same thing that is happening, right? So we see some jobs that are more process-oriented, manual jobs that people are going to start not to do anymore, and they are going to be focused on all these other jobs that are uniquely human. So that's why my tech talk was about highlighting the fact that artificial intelligence is making us more human, not less.
Yeah. And building on that, in a sense, listening to that was very interesting, and I love that point that you made. And one of the questions that I did have is, as these people start getting, as you said, pushed up the staircase, as they're starting to take on more human roles, in a sense, using their creativity, using their innovation, that is also sometimes a kind of like a set of skills that needs to be fostered to make sure that they are competitive in these times where the normal jobs and the kind of the regular process oriented jobs, as you said, can be done by softwares and can be done by automation, in a sense, and AI. So how do you as a leader kind of like encourage those more human skills of creativity, of innovation, of being able of collaboration between people in your team, in a sense?
So I mean, we did in the companies where I have been, particularly the last two, we did a lot of work in terms of talent development. Because coming back to the idea of artificial intelligence becoming more human, the artificial intelligence is automating activities at a very fast rate. In the old days, you went to university, you studied something, you could do that thing for your whole life. Now, you probably have to change your job every 10 years, right?
Yeah,
because
that's true.
you start, depending when you start, you are going to start on something. There is a high chance that thing might be automated, might change, might be disrupted. You have to move into something else. So you have to always be learning, right? Well, in Axiata, we created a very large training program that was focused on online learning. We trained around 600 people in analytics only across all these 6 countries that I mentioned. And I think it's always good to have a training budget where anybody can request a training, and then we just we just give them those trainings as long as they are in the right areas, right? So I think that is quite important. People, particularly, I typically work with young people, right? Because in analytics, it's typically young people. Young people are very they are used to learning, right? And they enjoy it. And this is the kind of people that I like hiring, right? One of the questions that I always ask in my interviews is, what have you studied this year? What have you actively taught yourself this year? Because I want people that are teaching themselves something, not learning something on the job just because I was there and I happen to have a project about this, I ended up learning. No, did you study something? Did you take a course? Did you do it actively?
No. That's a very good point, in a sense. And as you see, kind of like as you said, in the last few years, especially, a lot of hype or a lot of innovation in the AI and kind of like the data industry has been happening. I would say even 5 years ago, probably people are not as focused in this industry as they are now. A lot of people are now going in studying it. A lot of people are now looking at it from a corporate point of view, from a college student point of view, of things that are going to continue to grow in the future. Where do you see this industry headed, in a sense, and how can people right now going to university, making decisions to get into this industry, what do you think are the most important skills that they actually need to know outside of just the actual practical theoretical parts of it? What makes someone stand out in this industry?
I mean, so many questions. Let me start one by one.
Go ahead.
So as I said before, I'm running a venture that is called True Analytics, which what we do is monetization of data. Basically, 3 products. We do advertising, credit scoring, and we do customer research. But I'm going to tell you, for the young people that we are hiring, what we are looking for in terms of hard skills, right? Hard skills that we are looking for is not necessarily that they know a lot of, I mean, they don't need to know. I mean, there are so many developments that are happening every year that for me, as I said before, the first requirement is that they are ready to learn, okay? That they are ready to learn. Second requirement is that they have the basics. And the basics is they need to know programming, they need to know statistics, right? And they need to know communication. They have to be good at communication. And communication is one of the things that changes very wildly across cultures. But they have, as I was saying before, they have to be able to communicate with business people. They have to do it well, right? I think having these things is what is really going to make the difference for somebody young that is interested in analytics, right? Now there is a convergence between analytics, the metaverse, blockchain, right? Is going to come together. One of the things that, for example, I'm looking at and I feel quite interested in is how we can advertise in the metaverse, how we can use AI and analytics to advertise in the metaverse is something that I'm looking at. So all these things are getting combined, and good people that are going to make best of the new technology, innovations, etc., is people who can learn fast. Right? And this topic about communication, I mean, this is a very big thing.
One of the hardest things to learn. Yeah,
it's the hardest thing to learn. I mean, particularly having lived in many countries. No, there are countries that have a very indirect communication, or there are people that are very indirect when they are communicating. And there are people that are much more direct. There are countries or people where there is a very, I would say, very strong people. There is a very large distance to power. It means when somebody is in power, he knows that. And when somebody is not in power, he knows that. And he positions himself very far away from the other person, showing respect. In some cultures, that distance is huge. In other cultures, that distance is very small. In the US, it's very small. It's very flat. In some Asian cultures, it can be big. It can be big, right? And overcoming all these cultural differences is very tough. It's very tough. Sometimes as a manager, or for example, now I'm leading a business unit, or before I was leading a department. Sometimes as a manager, the most difficult thing to know is what your team is thinking.
And how do you get that?
It's not necessarily in every country. There are countries where we're talking about the US. US is very direct communicating. It's a very individualistic society. But in other environments is very difficult to really know what is happening out there.
And how do you, as I said, someone who's seen a lot of these different cultures in a sense, is there any common thread that or golden rules that you would say that help you kind of adapt to these different cultures and all of the unspoken rules? Or if not, how do you get the cultures which maybe do not speak up as much or do not really engage as much directly with their bosses and all of that to start really taking the lead and hearing their ideas out? So 2 questions.
Yeah. I think the reality is that you have to adapt. They are not going to adapt to you. So people in your team are not going to adapt to you. You are going to adapt. So what I would say, I mean, I have been in situations early in my career, this was in China, in which there was a team of people. They didn't necessarily speak very good English. And I really didn't know what they were thinking about different topics, right? Topics that were not necessarily very conflictual, topics that were very, very plain vanilla, right? I mean, in this project, whether we do this or that, right? Things very plain vanilla. And one time I remember I really didn't know what they wanted to do. And I was talking to a colleague of mine that had been in China for a long time, and he told me, well, I give you a trick that I use. So I used it. And the trick was basically, well, I mean, you ask them to go to a meeting, they come to the meeting room, and then you ask you ask the question, what do we do about this? Or what do you think about that? Or do we have these three options, A, B, C? Would you take A? Would you take B? Would you take C? Well, sometimes in this kind of, there are situations in which nobody says anything. Now in video conferences even more, right? So what I did at that time, and that was the advice, is, well, I mean, you make the question, and then at that moment you pretend that that something has happened that requires you out of the room. Somebody is calling you, you get a telephone call, etc. And then you say, you get out of the room, and then you say, well, I'm coming back in 10 minutes, but in the meantime, could you please help me answering this question that we have here? And then you appoint one of them. It doesn't matter really who. Typically, typically it could be the oldest, it could be the most senior. You appoint one of them, and then you say, well, can you discuss with them? And then when I come back, maybe you tell me, you summarize there in the whiteboard, you write, and then you tell me what the recommendation is. And that kind of works, right? Then when you come back, it's done, right? And because the person that has to give the summary is very clear that he's not giving his opinion, he's giving the opinion of the others, it becomes very easy for them to do that, right? I mean, it's not only cultural differences. Sometimes at that time when I was in China in 2007, 8, 9, not everybody spoke English well, right? So that was one of the things that I have realized. Other things that I have realized is that sometimes when I am in meetings, I look at people, I look at faces, and I realize that a lot of people are not watching the screen, the slide, the PowerPoint. A lot of people are not watching the PowerPoint. A lot of people are watching the face of the boss.
Okay, it's a different skill in a sense. It's a more interpersonal than looking at the data or the actual mission topic in a sense.
Which is fine, because by watching the face, you are understanding what he thinks. Is something that you wouldn't necessarily see in a Western company, right? But well, I mean, these are these kind of things where that are fun. At the end of the day, they're fun. There is another one that I really love, which is rumors, right? As a manager, sometimes you always need to find somebody who tells you the rumors. Those rumors that are circulating in the company, that if there is not somebody who you have asked, tell me about these things, you might never know. This person is angry because this thing happened. Maybe something I did, or maybe something that somebody, but we just don't know, right? So sometimes having somebody in the team that is gonna tell you those rumors, those things that are circulating around informally, but those things that will never come in a formal way to you, that is very, very important. So being able to find somebody like that is important. It's typically it could be a junior person. It's typically a junior person, right? The kind of person that is going to tell you this is a junior person.
But that is very sorry, go ahead. No, but that is very interesting, because like you don't think that rumors are so important until you put it in that context. Then you're right, in a sense. It is important to pick up in a sense. How do you go about
there are a lot of CEOs that I have met that don't have all the information. That there are people are not giving all the information because they are afraid, because they are different incentives, because they are different things, right? And sometimes the CEO or the leader is lacking information, sometimes very important information. So being able as a leader, particularly in certain cultures, to get that information informally from different sources, not from the main channel, being able to sync with another radio station that is like a pirate radio station that is means something, is very important, because otherwise you would never know it.
And how do you go about number one, or basically like forming those connections with people in your team? Because you have to find someone who, number one, trusts you, is able to tell the truth in a sense. Is that something do you look at in the hiring process, or sometimes you come into an organization and there's already existing people there? Who do you essentially like work with in a sense? Well, what do you
It's
look
very
for?
difficult, right? I mean, there is obviously, I mean, we are all human beings, right? There are always people that work together better than other people, right? It just happens. It just happens. There are people that are more alike independently of cultures, etc. Right? I remember in McKinsey, I did a project with people from the Middle East, and I had a lot of fun with them, because despite all these cultural differences that we had in terms of language, religion, etc., we were very much alike. I mean, Spain. I'm from Spain, and Spain was Muslim for 800 years, right? And there are a lot of cultural things in deep in your culture that make you connect with somebody that was similar to people that were living in Spain 500 years ago, and I don't know. So I was working in a project which was about doing M&A, and I was working with people from the Middle East, and I had an amazing connection with them. And it was a fun project. It was absolutely fun because of the people that we work with.
Okay, very, very well said. And I think as we wind down this conversation, I'm very curious that in all of these experiences, what do you think is one or two, or I would say truths that people need to know when they go into a different culture, or something that would help them adapt, that many people often don't think about, or that you've seen people sort of not get in their experience of kind of trying to adapt to another culture?
Don't have any assumption. Don't have an assumption about things. This is right, this is wrong. I mean, maybe it's right for you, maybe it's wrong for somebody else. Just don't have any assumption at all. Just go with the flow. Just go with the flow. Play by the ear, and what you see, you do, and just that. It's a little bit like when you learn a language, no? What you hear, you repeat. So I mean, and that is what I would say. I mean, even if a behavior or an idea in one place is good, that doesn't mean that in another place it's going to be bad, or is not going to be bad, right? And the other way around, right? We are used to a lot of things in Western societies that other countries find it surprising. And in the same way, in Asia, I've been in Asia most of my life, right? In Asia, we do things that in other countries they don't do, right? But I mean, I'm saying all these things as if I am an expert in this. I'm not. I'm making mistakes all the time, and I'm making big mistakes all the time, right? Probably as you are getting older, that becomes you start developing bad habits as well, right? But I think my recommendation will be go with the flow. Don't have any assumption. Just go with the flow. If you do something that somebody at some point doesn't like, just apologize and go on.
Okay, Very, very good advice. And I like the thing that you say. It's like learning a language. When you hear, you repeat, you kind of like nobody, like, or at least I feel like you really have to immerse yourself in the environment and see first, and then go with that. So very, very good analogy. And thank you so much for all of your stories and all of that. I'm so surprised we're actually at the end of our session, because I've been just amazed by all of the stories that you shared. And I think that if anyone needs to learn how to adapt to culture, work as a team across borders, you are one of the pros that we should speak to, because you just have so many experiences and tricks that we can use in a sense. So thank you so much for taking your time to actually spend with us. It's personally been very helpful with me as I start navigating all of these things, and I hope it's been as fruitful for our audience as I enjoyed this conversation like so much. And thank you for
Thank you, Harsha. Great to talk to you. Has been amazing, and thank you so much for the opportunity. Absolutely great. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I'm doing this thing now because what I hear, I do what I do. I do because I've been living in Thailand for 1 year, so I say thank you in the Thai way, which absolutely, I mean, becomes very natural now to me to do this. Yeah, absolutely. I think this ability to adapt, even if you do little steps, like, for example, you go to a new country and you just learn a few words just out of politeness. All these things are very, very important.
All right, very cool. So to end this session, can you teach us how to say thank you in another language so we can thank our audience in a different language for today's session? Language of your choice.
I'm going to choose Spanish. I'm going to choose Spanish, which is my mother tongue. So thank you in Spanish is gracias. Gracias.
All right.
Gracias.
Okay.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Gracias to our audience and our amazing speaker. If you had fun as much as I did, make sure you like and comment in the chat. And thank you once again. And this is Harsha signing off. See you guys again next week.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.